Welcome to my channel, The Binge Eating Therapist. This video is for my fellow counsellors and therapists about running your groups. I am a big advocate of group work. I think group work is incredibly powerful and can reach parts and processes that are really difficult to do in individual work. I often speak to therapists and counsellors who like the idea of running a group, but they have certain anxieties about finding people, about whether they are qualified enough to run a group. So I wanted to address some of those things in this video. One of the things I do always strongly recommend to anyone looking to set up a group is that you have a very clear theme about who the group is for. I know some people like the idea of running a general therapy group where anyone can bring anything, but it's quite a tough one to find people who are willing to do that, because there's so much anxiety around coming to a group. Groups really stir us up and stir up those projections. So I think if you want to do a general therapy group, you're better off opening it up to other counsellors and therapists or trainees. People who are already quite therapeutically minded are more likely to join a general process group. But on the whole, I mean, it's probably pretty evident my groups are about binge eating. And it wasn't until I started training other therapists in setting up groups that I started to hear all these incredible ideas for therapy groups. So one therapist has set up a group for women who are online dating. Someone else has set up a group for low mood. Somebody ran a group for NHS frontline workers during COVID. There's another guy who's looking at setting up a group for men who are abusing steroids. Someone else is looking at a group for bereavement, like all these kinds of subjects. Some of them I would never have even thought of. And it's a real opportunity, I think, as a practitioner to work with an area that you're really passionate about. And a lot of the time, therapists will choose subjects that they have some lived experience about. Now, that's not necessary, but I find for me, one of the reasons why clients come to me is because I'm quite open about the fact that I've struggled with binge eating. So they think, okay, there's someone who'll get it, and hopefully there's going to be other people in the group that get it as well. And that helps to override the ambivalence that a lot of people feel about groups. So it doesn't mean that you have to be this specialist in a subject. Just the fact that you are interested in a subject, or you have some personal knowledge, or even if you know people who've gone through it, there's so much life experience that you bring in on top of your therapeutic skills that can be enormously helpful to running a group. And then of course people often think, well, it's got to be a therapy group. We don't even have to call it a therapy group. It doesn't have to be a therapy group. There's so many different types of groups you can run, from sort of psychoeducation or therapy, or a combination of the two. Someone else is running a therapeutic book club for survivors of domestic abuse. So there are all these different structures and ways that we can use this. So I run, at the moment, I'm running 4 different types of groups. I've got an 8-week binge eating therapy group. So that's just a set period of time. I've got 3 groups that are binge eating therapy groups that are open-ended, so people could come for as long as they want. I actually think open-ended groups are a really good way to start up groups, because with a closed group, you may lose a couple of people in the first couple of weeks. You may end up with a smaller group, and you can't keep bringing people in when there's only a couple of weeks left with the group. Whereas with an ongoing group, it's now at the point where all my ongoing groups are full. So when someone leaves, someone on the waiting list takes their place. So the groups just constantly keep evolving and changing into new groups as people come and go. I also do another group which I call the Connect and Recover group. And I do these once a month, and it's 3 hours where 8 people meet with me on Zoom, and we spend 3 hours exploring our relationship with food. And the structure of this is really simple. I will ask some self-reflective questions. People come with a notepad and pen. They think and they write down, and then they share, and that turns into a discussion. And then I throw another question out, and then I throw in a bit of psychoeducation. And so it's this kind of gentle structure, which every group for me looks quite different, because sometimes the groups will go off in different directions, but I have a loose structure that I tend to work through with those. So there's a real opportunity of offering therapeutic support that isn't necessarily this weekly commitment that some people just cannot do, and it isn't necessarily this one-to-one therapy either. The last group I did is a support group once a month. So that's a lot more like as a drop-in thing. So that will change every week with different people coming along who just want to get some support and be around people who are also struggling with binge eating. So one thing I think is important to say is that I truly believe the demand is out there for this. I think people are longing to connect, especially since COVID. People are much more open to groups and online working too. So you can be really quite specific and niche with your group subject, because in theory you could have anybody in the country or internationally, if you feel like you can hold that in the group, to come and find your group and meet together. It's made everything so much more accessible. And of course, groups are more affordable generally than one-to-one help as well. So it's a real way to make it accessible and affordable for people. And it can also be pretty financially rewarding as a therapist as well. So it feels like the best of both worlds. And so then people are worried about, how do I find people for my group? How do I let people know about it? And therapists might say to me, oh, it's okay for you, you've got a social media platform. But the first group that I set up, I didn't have any social media presence. I think I had a couple of hundred followers on Instagram and that was it. And I filled that group up mainly by posters in the local area. It was an in-person group at the time. So in that first week, there was someone who'd come from the poster in Tesco and someone who'd come from the poster in Morrison. You can also promote posts on social media, so getting a good image and writing some text kind of explaining really clearly who this group is for and who you are as well, because people need to trust you in order to come to your group. So how you communicate your group is so important, and that's something that I help therapists to do. And I run an online community of therapists who are looking to set up groups, and we support each other with that. We share each other's posts, and also when people are writing out their posts, they'll share them in the group and get feedback from other people, which helps us kind of get our language clearer so that people can understand what it is we're offering and the potential value for them. So then in terms of being qualified enough or having the skills, generally I think that therapists and counsellors underestimate the skills that they have. There's so much information out there. There are so many great books. I mean, Yalom, who doesn't love Yalom? He writes about groups. You can dip into that. Get yourself a supervisor who's got some experience in running groups. My first group I ran was on a placement, and I hadn't had any extra training in running groups, but my supervisor was a group analyst, and I learned more from running that group and having supervision with him than I think any course, CPD weekend or something like that could have given me. And you started seeing clients before you were a fully qualified therapist or counsellor. I think it can be the same with groups. I think sometimes we can start doing the groups, and then when we're learning while we're doing, wasn't that the time when all the theory started to make sense when you started your clinical work, when you're on placement? Suddenly the stuff you're learning about in class makes all the sense in the world. You can go on a week-long course and you're only going to retain about, I don't know what they say it is, something like 5% of the information that you actually hear. So I think we want to feel ready, and we want to feel like we know everything, like we know enough, and you're never going to feel like you know enough. I am going to pop some resources below, some courses and books that I like as well if you want to delve into that. I also run training for therapists about how to get your group set up, so that takes you all the way up through to that first session, from finding people to assessments and contracting, how to manage and structure that first session to get you all set up in your groups and to support you along the way. Because if it's something you are interested in, I just want to give you the encouragement that it's doable and the world needs it.